On a quiet evening when the sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold, a small boy named Jack stood at the window of a tiny cottage, watching the last light fade behind the hills. The fields around his home were dry, the well was almost empty, and the cupboards inside held only crumbs. Jack pressed his forehead against the cool glass and wondered, "Will things ever change for us?" Jack lived alone with his mother in that little cottage at the edge of a village. Once they had been comfortable and happy. They had a small garden, a few chickens, and one gentle brown cow named Daisy. But over time, the rains came less often, the soil grew hard, and the plants stopped growing. They sold what they could, until the only thing left of real value was Daisy. One morning, Jack's mother stood at the wooden table, her hands trembling as she counted the last few coins. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were kind as always. "Jack," she said softly, "we have almost nothing left. We can't keep Daisy any longer. You must take her to the market and sell her. Get the best price you can. We need food, and we need it soon." Jack's heart ached at the thought of losing Daisy, who had been his friend since he was very small. He wrapped his arms around the cow's neck and whispered into her ear, "I'm sorry, girl. I'll make sure you go to someone kind." With a heavy heart, Jack took a rope, tied it gently around Daisy's neck, and began walking along the dusty road toward the village market. The morning sun was warm on his face, but he couldn't enjoy it. He walked slowly, patting Daisy's head from time to time, listening to the quiet sound of her hooves as they passed through a small patch of trees. Jack noticed an old man sitting on a fallen log beside the road. The man wore a long dark green coat, patched in places but neatly cleaned. His beard was silver, and his eyes sparkled like tiny stars, even in the daylight. "Good morning, young Jack," the old man said in a warm, gentle voice. Jack blinked in surprise. "You know my name, sir?" The old man smiled. "I know many things. I know you're going to market to sell your cow. And I know why." Jack glanced at Daisy and then at the old man. "We don't have enough food," he admitted. "I have to sell her so my mother and I can eat." The old man nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. It looked very plain, tied with a thin piece of golden string. "I have something special to offer you," he said. "Instead of coins, I will give you these." Jack frowned. "Beans?" he guessed. "Are those beans?" The old man chuckled. "Not just any beans. These are magic beans. Plant them tonight, and by morning you will see something extraordinary. They can bring you a chance greater than any bag of coins." Jack hesitated. His mother had asked for money, not beans. Magic sounded like something from bedtime stories, not from real life. "How do I know they're truly magic?" he asked. The old man leaned closer, his eyes shining. "Because I have seen what they can do. They grow as high as the clouds, maybe even higher. And up there, beyond the sky, are wonders you cannot imagine. But you must be brave enough to climb." Jack looked at Daisy again, then at the tiny bag in the man's hand. Deep inside, a small spark of hope flickered. Their life was already so difficult. Maybe, just maybe, taking a chance was better than doing the same things and hoping for a miracle. "All right," Jack said at last, swallowing nervously. "I'll trade Daisy for the beans." The old man's smile widened, not in a sneaky way, but with something that felt almost proud. He handed Jack the bag very carefully, as if it contained something fragile and precious. "Remember," he said, "plant them before midnight. And whatever you find at the top, keep your heart kind and your courage steady." Jack untied Daisy's rope and gave it to the old man with one last gentle stroke on her nose. "Goodbye, Daisy," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." As Jack walked back home, the little bag of beans felt impossibly light in his hand, and yet somehow heavy on his mind. When Jack stepped into the cottage, his mother turned to greet him with hopeful eyes. But when she saw that he carried no coins, no bread, no basket of food, only a tiny cloth bag, her face paled. "Jack," she said, her voice tight. "What happened? Where is Daisy? Where is the money?" "I traded her," Jack said, trying to sound confident. "For magic beans. The man said they'll grow as high as the clouds. They'll bring us a chance greater than any bag of coins." His mother's shoulders sagged as if the air had been let out of her. "Magic beans?" she repeated, her voice breaking. "Jack, we needed food. We needed money. We can't eat magic." She took the bag from his hand, opened it, and stared at the small, ordinary-looking beans inside. Anger, fear, and sadness washed over her all at once. Without another word, she walked to the window, opened it, and tossed the beans out into the garden. The tiny sound of them hitting the soil felt louder than a shouted word. "Go to bed, Jack," she said softly, with tears in her eyes. "We'll talk in the morning." Jack went to his tiny room in the corner of the cottage, feeling as if he had swallowed a stone. He lay on his small bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to his mother quietly crying in the other room. He wanted to say he was sorry, but the words wouldn't come out. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy, and he drifted into a restless sleep. Deep in the night, while the cottage was silent, something remarkable began to happen in the garden. From the very spot where the beans had fallen, the soil stirred. A small green shoot poked out, then another. Like curious fingers reaching toward the sky, they stretched higher and higher, growing faster than any plant ever had. The tiny shoots thickened into twisting vines, wide as tree trunks, covered in large emerald leaves that shimmered even in the moonlight. The beanstalk, because that's what it had become, swirled upward, curling and weaving, rising above the cottage roof, above the tallest tree, above the highest hill. It climbed and climbed until it disappeared into the clouds, leaving a trail of leaves and tiny glowing specks like stardust. Dawn. A soft golden light spilled into Jack's room. A strange, cool shadow fell across his pillow. He opened his eyes, yawned, and sat up. Something felt different. The air smelled fresher, like the forest after rain. He walked to the window and gasped. Right outside, where there had been only dry dirt and a few stubborn weeds, a gigantic beanstalk towered into the sky. It was so big that it made the cottage look like a toy house. Its twisting green trunk spiraled upward, vanishing into a blanket of fluffy white clouds. "It's real," Jack whispered. The beans were really magic. He rushed to the main room to tell his mother. She was already standing at the door, staring up at the beanstalk with wide eyes, her anger from the night before melting into astonishment. "Jack, what have you brought into our garden?" she breathed. Jack stepped closer to her. "The old man was telling the truth, Mother. Look how high it goes. He said there would be wonders at the top." His mother frowned, torn between fear and curiosity. "It could be dangerous," she warned. "We don't know what's up there." Jack's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a strange new courage. "We already know what's down here," he said gently, looking around their nearly empty cottage. "If there's even a small chance to change our lives, shouldn't we try?" His mother looked at him long and hard. Jack wasn't just a boy anymore. She saw the beginning of a brave young man in his eyes. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you must climb," she said, "promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll remember who you are. No treasure is worth losing your kindness." Jack nodded. "I promise, Mother. I'll come back. And when I do, things will be better for us. I'm sure of it." He filled a small bag with a piece of stale bread and a tiny wedge of cheese, everything they had left. Then he stepped outside, placed a hand on the cool, strong beanstalk, and began to climb. Up he went. The beanstalk was sturdy beneath his feet, its thick vines forming natural steps. Large leaves made shady platforms where he could rest for a moment, catching his breath and looking down at the shrinking world below. Soon the cottage looked like a little white dot, and the fields turned into pale green squares. Higher and higher Jack climbed. Birds flew past, chirping in surprise at the strange new plant that had invaded their sky. A gentle breeze tugged at Jack's shirt, but he held on tight. His fingers curled around the vines, his legs moved steadily, and even though his arms grew tired, The excitement in his chest kept him going. After what felt like hours, Jack entered the thick, misty layer of clouds. Everything around him became soft and white. Cool droplets clung to his hair and eyelashes. For a moment he couldn't see anything but fog, and the world below vanished from sight. But the beanstalk kept going, and so did Jack, trusting his hands and feet. Then suddenly he burst through the top of the clouds. The sky above was a brighter blue than he had ever seen, and the clouds below looked like a fluffy, endless sea. And there, not far from the place where the beanstalk ended, was something Jack never could have imagined. It was a giant castle. Its walls were made of pale stone that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. The towers were so tall they seemed to touch the sky all over again. A wide path of smooth, silver-colored stone led from the top of the beanstalk to the enormous front gate. Around the castle, instead of normal trees and flowers, grew plants of unbelievable size, roses as tall as houses, daisies with petals bigger than umbrellas, and mushrooms you could sit on like chairs. Jack's mouth fell open. "This must be the land above the clouds," he whispered. "Who could live in a place like this?" He walked slowly along the stone path, his steps tiny compared to everything around him. The castle door, made of dark, carved wood, was several times taller than the cottage back home. He found a smaller side door, just big enough for someone of his size to slip through, and tried the handle. To his surprise, it opened with a soft creak. Inside, the castle was just as enormous. The ceiling stretched high overhead, and the paintings on the walls showed strange scenes of storms, mountains, and skies full of lightning and thunder. Everything was oversized: tables, chairs, shelves, and Jack had to climb onto a stool just to look over the edge of a wooden table. On that table, glowing softly, sat a golden harp shaped like a woman with long flowing hair. Next to it rested a simple wooden cage with a tiny golden hen inside. Jack's eyes widened. The hen's feathers looked like they were woven from sunlight. Before Jack could move any closer, he heard a distant sound. A slow, thunderous stomp. Then another. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Thump, thump, thump. Jack's heart raced. Someone was coming. He quickly climbed down from the stool and slid behind a large ceramic jar near the hearth. From there he could see the long, grand hall that led deeper into the castle. A moment later, a giant figure appeared. It was a giant. An enormous man with broad shoulders and a beard the color of storm clouds. His steps shook the floor like gentle earthquakes. He wore a tunic stitched from cloth so thick it could have been used as a tent, and his boots were as large as rowboats. With each step, he sniffed the air loudly. "Fififofum," the giant rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." Jack's hands clenched around his knees as he tried to stay perfectly still. "He can't really smell me, can he?" Jack wondered. Maybe giants always say that. But the giant stopped in the middle of the hall and sniffed again, frowning. "The wind must be playing tricks on me," he grumbled at last. "No one would dare climb up here." A giant woman appeared from a side room, carrying a tray the size of a wagon. "You and your nonsense," she scolded gently. "There's no one here but you and me. Now sit, and I'll bring your supper." Jack watched as the giant sat at the table. The giantess placed before him a massive loaf of bread, a wheel of cheese as big as a table, and a steaming pot of soup. Though they were huge and fearsome, Jack noticed something. The giantess's face looked kind, even if tired and worried, and the giant's eyes, though stern, were not fully cruel. There was something lonely in the way he hunched his shoulders and ate without speaking. When the giant had finished most of his meal, he wiped his mouth with a napkin the size of a blanket and turned toward the golden hen. "Lay!" he commanded. The tiny hen ruffled her golden feathers and obediently laid a single perfect golden egg. It rolled gently onto the table, gleaming in the light. Jack's eyes widened again. "A hen that lays golden eggs. If I had that, Mother and I would never go hungry again," he thought. The giant chuckled, scooped up the egg, and dropped it into a large chest that already held several others. Then he turned to the golden harp. "Sing," he said to T once. The harp strings began to glow softly. In a sweet, clear voice, the harp sang a lullaby that filled the hall with gentle, comforting music. The giant's eyelids began to droop. His heavy head tilted to one side, and within minutes, he was snoring loudly, the sound echoing through the castle like distant thunder. Jack waited a little longer, just to be sure. When the giant's snores grew deeper and more regular, Jack slipped quietly from his hiding place. His heart pounded, but he moved carefully, step by step, toward the table. He climbed back onto the stool and reached for the golden hen's cage. It was surprisingly light. The hen looked at him with curious black eyes but did not squawk or flap her wings. "Don't worry," Jack whispered. "I'll take good care of you." He glanced at the harp, but it seemed more alive, more aware, and he feared it might cry out if he touched it. For now the hen would be enough. He could always come back later. If he dared with the cage in his arms, Jack climbed down and tiptoed toward the door, trying not to look back at the sleeping giant. Every creak of the floor sounded like a shout in his own ears, but the giant did not stir. Jack slipped out of the castle, hurried down the stone path, and reached the top of the beanstalk. Holding the cage tightly, he began to climb down, faster this time, his heart racing with excitement. The journey back through the clouds and down to the earth felt shorter, though his arms trembled from the effort. When he finally reached the ground and stepped into the familiar garden, his mother rushed out of the cottage, her apron fluttering. "Jack, you're back. I was so worried," she cried, pulling him into a tight hug. Jack laughed with relief. "Mother, look," he said, holding up the cage gently. "This hen lays golden eggs. We'll never be poor again." His mother stared at the gleaming feathers and the small golden egg already nestled in the corner of the cage. Slowly, a smile spread across her face, but there was also something else, a question. "How did you get this?" she asked quietly. Jack told her everything. The castle above the clouds, the giant couple, the hen that laid golden eggs. As she listened, his mother's smile faded a little. "Oh, Jack," she said softly, "I'm grateful we have a way to survive now. But we must remember that taking things that belong to others, even if they are giants, is not truly right. Treasure gained without honesty can carry trouble with it." Jack lowered his head. He knew she was right. I didn't think about it that way," he admitted. "I only thought about how hungry we were, and how hard our lives have been." His mother touched his cheek gently. "I understand. But if we are to have a better life, it should be built on kindness and courage, not just on taking what shines." That night, as they watched the hen lay another golden egg, Jack lay awake thinking about her words. The image of the giant's lonely face, of the giantess carrying that heavy tray, kept returning to his mind. He realized that even giants could feel alone, could work for what they had. The next morning, Jack woke up with a new idea, one that made his stomach flutter nervously. He went to his mother and said, "I'm going back up the beanstalk." His mother looked startled. "Jack, no. You barely escaped last time." Jack shook his head. "I'm not going to steal this time. I'm going to make things right. I'll bring something back for us, yes, but I will also explain myself. I don't know how the giant will react, but I need to try. I don't want to spend my life afraid of what I did." His mother searched his face, saw the determination there, and finally nodded. "You're growing into a good man, Jack. Do what you think is right. And remember, your greatest treasure is your heart." Jack packed a small bundle of bread, now fresh thanks to the gold they had exchanged for food, and set off once more. He climbed the beanstalk through the clouds to the land above. When he reached the castle, he didn't sneak in this time. Instead, he walked up to the huge front door and knocked, his hand trembling just a little. The door opened a crack, and the giantess peered out, her eye as big as Jack's head. When she saw him, she gasped. "You," she said. "You're the boy who came here yesterday. Hurry inside before he sees you. He'll be furious if he finds you here again." Jack stepped inside, his voice steady. "I'm not here to hide this time," he said. "I've come to talk. And to apologize." The giantess stared at him in surprise. I took your golden hen, Jack admitted. We were hungry and poor, and I saw a way to save my mother and myself. But I understand now that it was wrong to take what belongs to someone else, even if that someone is a giant. The giantess's expression softened with something like sadness. We are not the kindest giants in the world, she said slowly. My husband has done things he is not proud of. Much of our treasure came from people he frightened. But this hen and that harp were gifts from the sky itself long ago. They are all we have left that feels truly ours. Jack swallowed. He had not expected this. I came to say I'm sorry, he repeated, and to ask if there's any way we can make a fair exchange. I don't want to live off stolen treasure, but I also don't want my mother to starve. The giantess thought for a long moment, then sighed. You are braver than many grown men I've known, little Jack. Wait here. She disappeared into the hall just as the deep footsteps of the giant began to echo again. He lumbered into the room, eyes narrowed, nostrils flaring. Fifa, I smell. Yes, yes, the giantess interrupted, waving one hand. You smell the boy. He's here. But before you decide to grind anyone's bones, listen. The giant glared at Jack, who stood in the middle of the room, legs shaking slightly but chin lifted. You dared to return, the giant growled. You stole from me. Why should I not throw you off the clouds? Jack took a deep breath. Because I came back, he said quietly. Thieves don't usually return to say they're sorry. I know what I did was wrong, but I also know you understand what it's like to want more than you have. My mother and I have almost nothing. The hen saved us. Still, I'm willing to give her back if you ask. I don't want a better life built on a lie. The giant stared at him, surprised into silence. The hall felt very still, as if even the walls were listening. At last, the giant sighed, a sound like a distant storm fading. You humans, he muttered, shaking his head. Always so small and yet so stubborn. He walked to a large chest and opened it, revealing a small pile of golden eggs. We already have more than we need, he admitted. The hen lays faster than we can use. I was angry because something was taken from me, not because I truly needed it. The giant looked down at Jack. Keep the hen, he said gruffly. Let her eggs feed you and your mother. But promise me you'll never sneak into my home again. Jack's eyes shone with gratitude. I promise, he said quickly. And thank you. Truly. The giantess smiled, wiping a tear from the corner of her large eye. Wait, she said gently. Take this as well. She picked up the golden harp and held it carefully. The harp's carved face seemed to watch Jack thoughtfully. This harp sings songs that heal the heart, the giantess explained. Sometimes it reminds us of what we've lost. Sometimes it reminds us of what we still have. Perhaps your village needs that more than we do. Jack hesitated. Are you sure? He asked. The giant nodded once. Consider it a trade. We give you music and gold, and you give us a little peace. No more sneaking. No more stealing. If you ever visit again, you come through the front door and you come as a guest, not a thief. Jack placed a hand over his heart. I promise. I'll never forget your kindness. The harp strings shimmered, and for a moment it played a gentle, hopeful tune, as if it agreed. Jack returned down the beanstalk carefully, the golden harp strapped to his back and the hen's cage in his arms. This time he felt lighter, as if he had set down a heavy burden he hadn't known he was carrying. When he reached home, his mother ran out to greet him again, worried and yet hopeful. He told her everything that had happened, how he had apologized, how the giants had chosen kindness over anger, and how the harp now belonged to them as well. They placed the golden hen in a safe spot and set the harp on a small table. That evening, as the sun sank below the hills and the first stars appeared in the sky, Jack plucked the harp strings gently. A soft, warm melody filled the cottage. It wrapped around them like a comforting blanket, easing their worries and making their tiny home feel full and bright. The hen laid another golden egg, which they would later exchange for food, clothes, and seeds to plant in their garden. Over time, Jack and his mother's lives changed. They repaired their cottage, bought new tools, and shared their good fortune with neighbors who were struggling. People from the village began to gather at their home in the evenings, listening to the golden harp songs and forgetting their troubles for a little while. The beanstalk remained in the garden, reaching up to the sky, a reminder of the adventure that had begun with a handful of beans, a moment of foolishness, and a boy's decision to make things right. Sometimes, Jack would look up at the clouds and wonder what the giant and his wife were doing. He liked to imagine them sitting in their enormous hall, eating supper while the wind hummed outside, feeling just a little less lonely because somewhere far below, a boy they had forgiven was living a better life. And every now and then, when the breeze blew just right, Jack thought he could hear a low, rumbling laugh and a gentle giant sigh of contentment. That night, as Jack lay in bed, the golden harp's last notes fading into the quiet, he whispered a promise to himself. "No matter how high I climb," he murmured, "I'll always remember where I came from, and I'll always choose kindness even when it's hard." With that thought in his heart, he closed his eyes and drifted into a peaceful sleep, dreaming of castles above the clouds, giant friends, and a future filled not just with gold, but with goodness. And somewhere in the sky, among the soft glowing stars, the old man in the green coat smiled, knowing the magic beans had found the right boy after all.